Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, The Art and Science of Hiring, hosted by Keen Alignment. Our panelists today are Maji Graziano, Chief Evangelist for Keen Alignment, and Elizabeth Loretto, the HR Administrator for the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. Maji, take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for being with us. And today on the Art and Science of Hiring, we're going to go over the elements of creating a conscious hiring process, what's needed, how to do it, and Elizabeth will share her stories in implementing and operating inside of a conscious hiring process to develop a better culture at the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority. Elizabeth, anything you'd like to say before we begin?
Just that I'm excited to be here. I really believe in this process, and so I'm really excited to tell our story about how it's impacted our approach and our success.
So we all know that employee engagement is no stranger. Engagement has been plummeting for about the last 15 years. Now, the good news here is engagement has gone up 2 whole points from 70% of the workforce being disengaged to only 68% of the workforce, but those 2 points mean a lot. And so more and more companies are waking up to the need to do a better job around hiring, onboarding, mentoring, developing, and engaging people on a daily basis. We still have an issue, though, if 68% of the people in the American workforce are not engaged. We also have almost 1/3 of all people who take jobs feel after the fact that it wasn't a good match. So about 1/3 of the people landing positions just don't feel like they're in the right role. And so we've got to look at how we're hiring, how we're onboarding, how we're bringing them in, how we're even describing the job so that we can mitigate that, because the cost of a mishire is anywhere from 3 to 7 times that person's salary. We also have a huge sparse bench. We've got a certain generation leaving the workforce or changing the way they're going to work. We've got lots of organizations using consultants. And we have an adverse impact or a diminishing number of people sitting on the bench or raising their hand for the bench saying, I want to be in leadership. I want to be a manager. And when people are retiring and they're leaving the workforce, we need a progressive bench for people who we can promote. Also, we're seeing more and more C-suite, CFO, CEO, general manager, vice president saying, hey, we'll do this people stuff. We'll spend money on the people stuff. We'll implement, but what's our ROI going to be? And we're noticing and getting a lot of phone calls from and training HR people who say, I don't understand how I can put a return on investment on communications training, or a return on investment on cultural alignment, or even a return on investment on quality hiring. And we'll talk about that today. And last but not least, there is an absolute huge competency gap between people exiting the workforce and people coming in. I just talked to a young man, family-run business, 3rd generation. They're in the disposal industry or waste management. And his number one mentor is his grandfather. But his grandfather doesn't work at the business anymore. And his way of working and thinking about things is very structured. But his mother, who's been the in-between person, that's not how she operates. She kind of operates like a typical baby boomer, and lots of change, and let's change things up all the time. And what he said is, I really go to my grandfather for knowledge to help me learn this business, because he was structured and disciplined. But things that the grandfather had to deal with are not necessarily the same kind of things that we're dealing with in the 21st century. So this competency gap exists because changing of the guard, handing over the baton, and also different ways that different generations learn to work and learn to process work. So these are some pretty big challenges facing us, and hiring and the way we hire can really help solve it. Now, when we look at the employment engagement diagram or mind mapping, this is from design thinking, which is really looking at engagement from the outside in. What's the employee's experience? What does the employee need? Some of the most important things are that the employee wants to be connected to the mission vision of the organization. My question is, does your hiring process account for that? Does your hiring process bring in the mission and the vision and then communicate effectively from day one with these candidates why they're coming on board and how they are to serve the mission and vision? People are also saying they really want to trust their managers. I got a statistic today that said 70% of the people would trust a stranger over their direct boss, which is pretty sad statistic. But people want to trust the managers that work in their company. They want to trust the senior executives, and they want to know that the senior executives have their best interests in mind. And my question for you is, does your hiring process include enough of the senior level leaders? And is it inclusive of what they need and what they want? And is that built into the hiring process so people can earn that trust early? People want inclusion. They want to know that your company includes all sorts of people in decisions and in projects and in moving the business forward, not just the executive team or not just the HR team. They want to know that they have a shot, that they'll get a shot. They also want to know that you care about on-the-job training and you're not going to rush people through. We're onboarding a couple folks this week. And my team said, hey, Maji, you need to slow down because people need to have the training in bite-sized pieces. And does your onboarding and hiring program take that into consideration and take into consideration how the person you're hiring learns and how much time the person that's leaving the job will have to train? That's very important. Many companies say, we don't deal with that until they come on board, but we need to understand the learning style, whether it's kinesthetic, auditory, or visual, before we hire somebody. And then we need to look at how we're training them and is it going to meet their needs? Because hiring is expensive and training is even more expensive. We need to make sure that we've considered all that. And then diversity. Are we using a process that includes everybody? And that, do we have a diverse enough pipeline where we're pulling people in from different geographies, from different socioeconomic classes? Or is our hiring process, we hire friends and we only hire friends of friends, and so therefore we're hiring a lot of people that are alike? And does your hiring process follow the four-fifths rule of discrimination? Do you accommodate for that, or are you going to get in trouble because you don't have a validated hiring process by the OFCCP? So customer service efforts. Employees care that you care if you're keeping your customers happy and that you're doing work to keep your customers happy, because employees know if customers defect, then there won't be any stability there. And so is your brand built in? Is your customer brand built into your hiring brand? Because both people are really customers. Both are customers. One is an external customer paying you for goods and services. The other is an internal customer paid to deliver those goods and services. And it's the same philosophy, just one is internal and one is external. And most employees need recognition. And are you getting to know your people that you're hiring in the hiring process so you know how they want to be recognized and rewarded and what turns them on and what turns them off? People also want self-actualization and to be excited about their job. One of the top drivers of engagement and of a constructive culture is that people feel connected to the purpose and the mission, not just as outside of themselves, but they see how they connect to that. So when you're hiring, are you interviewing and asking questions about that purpose and that commitment and ensuring that people will be excited about the actual work they're doing? And then people also say they want respect. Do you treat your candidates with respect, or do you make them wait in the lobby or make them wait 5 days for a callback? Or are you responding in 24 hours to people so they know you respect their time and their effort? And it's important. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, those candidates shouldn't expect me to get back to them. Don't they know what else I'm doing? Well, yes, and then put a technology in place to alert them of what's going on so you can keep them present with your opportunity, and you're demonstrating how you respect employees in the hiring process. Another main aspect and element of employee engagement is safety. Do you deal with safety in the interview process? And what I mean by safety is, yes, there's machines and there's equipment that people can get hurt, or you might be in a bad neighborhood and you need some security. But I'm talking about, do you make people feel safe? Do you take the time to connect with them before you start barraging them with questions? Do you take time to get to know who they are as a human before you start asking about what they can do for you? That's all part of safety. Emotional safety has everything to do with it. When applicants feel safe, when applicants feel that you have their best interests in mind, they will tell you the truth. They will give you deeper answers. They will do a better job on the interview. And good future. People want to know that whether it's the job they have right now or the job that they'll be trained for someday or the job that they'll leave you for in 3 or 4 years, that they're going to be equipped to go into the future. When I owned recruiting firms and I spent many, many years, 15 years, placing people day after day, one of the most important questions people would ask me is, where is this job going to take me? Now, maybe they asked me that because of the way I was interviewing them. But I always felt like if I'm not placing you in a job that's going to get you your future, I must be placing you in a job that gives you the tools and build your tool belt so that you can go get that future. And last but not least, what's our work-life balance policy? What's our work-life navigation? What's our work-life schematic and thinking about how people work? Are we 100% hands-off? You can work remote. You never have to report to work. Or do we have structure and policies around work and life? Or do we have a basis of trust? Listen, you can have time off for good behavior to go see your kid's baseball game as long as you get your work done. It's a two-way street. So when you're looking at your hiring process, I invite you to use the design thinking model and look from their eyes. If the candidate could tell you what they needed and what they wanted, how could you weave that through your hiring process so that they're really clear what you're committed to in terms of employee engagement, and you don't wait until they get an offer to have that experience? Candidates start making their opinion about your company from the first hello. And so what are you doing to solidify that first hello? Elizabeth, anything for you around the mind mapping and how you use this in your process for Santa Clara Open Space Authority?
Yeah, I think a lot of these things are things we prioritize, but ones that really stand out to me are the mission and vision. We are an incredibly mission-based organization in the work we do, being connected to land conservation. And we view it that no matter your role, whether you're at the front desk sitting at the desk all day, or you're actually out in our open space preserves, you have a connection to that mission and you are an advocate for that mission. So that's really important to us, and one of the very first things we're always looking for with our candidates. We want candidates who want to really be connected to the job, to the work they're doing, and not just have a job. So in our at every step of the process, we're checking for that alignment. Some other great things about like inclusion: we're a small team, 40 people, so people really do want to have a say. We're not large enough that you can have a C-suite who does all the decision making. Everyone knows what's going on, so that's really important, and we just tell that story throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. So one of the most important elements of creating a people ROI and of creating a new hiring process or any initiative that elevates the human system is we have to understand the cost and the benefit and the payoff. And what I hear from most HR people that I spend time and coach and train is, they really didn't spend a lot of time in accounting. Now, Elizabeth is different because she used to do accounting. But most people don't spend a lot of time in accounting and finance before going into HR. And we're seeing more and more chief people officers that actually come out of accounting and finance because they understand the return on investment. They understand capital expenditure. They understand what it's going to take to invest, and they do the natural Ben Franklin and tell you what you're going to get on return. So some of the numbers that I think you need to understand if you're really going to revive and inspire your hiring process is that you understand how to do a overall metric on what's the total number of people you have in your organization and what are your payroll costs. So you can do the math on what's your average cost per employee. Then if you're going to spend dollars on training, the same concept of what is your cost for that benefit and or what is that cost for that service and what are you going to get out of that service. And so you need to be able to do the math not only on what your costs are for people, but what your costs are for training, and then how is the company going to get their payoff. And whether it's training in the hiring process or reviving the hiring process, it costs money to improve a hiring process. There's values-based behavioral interviewing that's custom, that has to get developed. This is not about downloading questions off the internet. This is very methodically matching the behaviors that you need in that role with questions that will tell you if the candidate has those. Really methodically looking at what are our core values, what is it that we say we want, and then what are the behaviors that match those values. That takes time and money, and you have to be able to validate that. If you're using assessments, that takes time to learn how to use the assessment, time to interpret the assessment, and money to pay for the assessment. So you've got to be able to validate. One last thing I want to say about the money is what's the cost of unwanted turnover in your organization? If a non-exempt person or an exempt person is 5 to 7 times, that's what it costs to replace a bad hire or the wrong hire. For non-exempt, it's anywhere between 1 and 4 times, depending on their role. Well, what's that costing you, not just to replace the wrong person, but to keep the wrong person? And so it's time to start to wrap your head around the numbers, the math of it all. And if that's just not your strong suit, enroll somebody in accounting and finance to help you know what questions to ask and to help you figure it out. But it's very important, whether it's conscious hiring or any initiative that you want to do with HR, you must be able to do the Ben Franklin on it and say what the company's going to get out of it. And there's a lot of non-financial benefits, but CEOs respond to metrics in finance, most CEOs. So let's first start about the 3 misperceptions you may have currently about hiring. Most people that we work with tell us these are the things that they've had to deal with and face in the understanding that they needed to update their hiring process. First and foremost, that gut instinct works. Gut instinct is your automatic reaction, that hit that you get that says, oh my gosh, I love this person, or oh my gosh, I can't stand this person. So I'm going to have Elizabeth share in a moment about her experience with all 3 of these. But what I want you to understand is that most people, unless they are really in tune with their intuition, and that takes something. It's not just something, oh, I really have a great intuition. You have to be super in tune to discern the difference between your thinking that comes from your past and your intuition that comes from, whoops, sorry, I pressed forward and I didn't mean to do it, and your intuition that comes from your internal barometer, your internal wisdom, your knowledge. It takes something to be attuned with that. So mostly gut instinct doesn't work. We respond to somebody in the first 30 seconds of them talking to us and we're like, oh my God, I love this person. They remind me of, or oh my gosh, I can't stand this person because they remind me of. And here's the problem. We stop listening the rest of the interview. For some of us, we do it in 10 seconds. For some of us, we do it in 30 seconds. For some, it takes 5 minutes. But when it happens, it's game over because we stop listening. Second misperception is that candidates don't want to be evaluated, that it's a candidate's market and they don't want to have to go through all that rigmarole to get a job. Well, the truth is, if people desire belonging, which they do, all the studies show that people want to belong, they also want to feel purpose and meaning in their work. They want self-actualization. Those people, which is 90% of the people working, don't want to be in a job where they fail. They want to know they have a shot at winning. Like, I'm going to forget. What is the Hamilton? He starts the playoff with, I'm not going to miss my shot. People want their shot. And if assessments and values-based behavioral interviewing can help them get their shot, then they want to be evaluated. And last, that the hiring managers are more powerful than I am. So as a recruiter, we knew we were paid a lot of money to advise and coach hiring managers. And it's a big difference when I'm working with an internal HR person or internal recruiter. They say, well, you know what, the hiring manager is the ultimate authority. No, that's not true. You are the ultimate authority. You spend all day, every day in the trenches of hiring. You know the candidate market. You know why people leave jobs. You know why people turn down offers. You know why people take jobs. You also understand the systemic impacts when the wrong hire is made in the organization. What the hiring manager knows is their business, their department. What they know is the job. So if you want to get the hiring manager and you on the same page, you need to interview the hiring manager before you start hiring, before you actually start the hiring process, so you can get alignment. But in the final hour with no alignment, and the hiring manager says, well, I just have this feeling that they're not the right person. That's not what we want to be doing. So Elizabeth, I'd like you to share your experience of the misperceptions and how that shifted for you, or stories about how that impacted you.
Yeah, well, so I think for gut instincts, I years ago was just always prone to following that gut, trusting my gut. And once I decided I liked somebody, I would just talk myself into them more and more and more, and would even, with the absence of data or real insight into who they were, just my thought was so easily swayed that, like, oh, that was a great conversation, there will be great candidate. And that oftentimes made for bad hires. In terms of candidates not wanting to be evaluated, I think when I first started using assessments and more richer tools to really learn about the candidates, I was afraid, and I would soften the request for the conversation or for them to complete the assessment because I didn't want to scare them off. But what I've realized since then is that the candidate, those assessments and what we're pursuing in those evaluations are at the core of how we operate here at our business at the Open Space Authority. And I need candidates who are willing to be self-aware, be evaluated. And so if somebody's not interested and opts out because they don't want to go through the steps of our process, then they weren't the right hire for us. And I no longer feel disappointed to have lost to them, or that I've offended them by asking them to do an assessment. And then also I've had candidates since then tell me that they find our process to be really candidate centric, and they like it, and they like the insights that they get about themselves by going through the questions we utilize and going through the values-based behavioral interviews and all of that. So I now see that value.
Awesome. Now, how about the hiring managers are more powerful than I am?
I fell victim to that for a long time. And I would allow my process to be mucked with by hiring managers. This manager wanted to insert this step of a process, or halfway through a recruitment say, oh, you know, I'd like to ask the candidates to do this new thing, like to do a supplemental questionnaire. Never mind that we've already gone through hundreds of applicants. And what I came to realize was that I need to own the process so that it's consistent, so that we're getting the same data, the same insights into our candidates. And I can not sell, but pitch our candidates to the hiring managers in the way that meets their needs and expectations. And so having that initial alignment you spoke about has proven to be the key for me to be able to say, here's the pool of candidates and here's why they're all great, and have the hiring managers say, you're right, I'm really excited to meet them all.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, good. So it's always good to have real stories, right? So we believe that hiring and ensuring the right people are getting in the door for the right reasons is the one philosophy conscious for your company, aligned with your company mission, vision, and values and goals. A conscious hiring process is the one philosophy guaranteed to elevate employee engagement, strengthen workforce alignment, and optimize how people contribute. Because when people take a job for the right reasons, they're already connected. They've hitched their wagon to your train, and they want to be on the team, not for the paycheck, but for the right reasons. And we believe our methodology, when implemented, like Elizabeth's company and other organizations have done, makes that difference. So I want to share with you how this whole thing got started in the first place. I owned a staffing firm, recruiting firm up in Chicago, or over in Chicago. And we had extraordinary results for our customers. 88% of everybody that we placed stayed at least 24 months. It was unbelievable. It compared to our competitors. And people would call us and ask us, can you do what you do for us? And I would say, yeah, pay me a fee. And they'd say, no. We want you to teach us the process. We'll pay for the process. And I had to really look at what I was going to do about that. And at the same time of producing extraordinary results for our customers, my own company had a performance management issue. I had 14 recruiters and I was the number one producer. I was the owner. I was the manager. I shouldn't have been the number one producer. And I had to really grow in that arena and eat my own dog food and make sure that we were using our own hiring process that we were using for our customers on ourselves. And so what we did is with the two things happening at once, the company saying, we want you to teach us this, and me looking at my own business, we reverse engineered our entire placement process, from how we took a job requisition to how we pitched the candidates at the end. We reversed the whole thing, reverse engineered the whole thing from start to finish, and we created conscious hiring. And we have implemented it in over 100 companies with over 10,000 employees being touched by it, and it makes a difference. And even organizations that will call us and say, we want you to use that process. We want you to do the hiring. This is back when I owned Alliance HR Network. They would give us 1 or 2 requisitions, and because of the results we produced, they would give us 250 or 400 and say, use the exact same process on every one of these people. And it was truly a breakthrough. It was a breakthrough in my own company, and it was a breakthrough for customers like Discovery International, who is now part of the Publicis family. They had an extreme high turnover in their meetings department. When they called me, they had 30 people in that one department and had a 300% turnover. They just couldn't get people to stay, and they needed 20 hires in 2 weeks. And my first instinct is, I can't do this. If they're temp, that's fine, but perm? She said, not only can you do it, but you're the only one who could do it, and I need you. We just signed a contract with a brand new customer, and they think we have a department. We don't have a department. You must find it. So we deployed this hiring process. We started with looking at their corporate culture and their brand, what their values were and their behaviors of success, and their track record in other departments for promotion. And we created this whole splash, this employee brand strategy. We held a career day in their name, close to their office, but not in their office. We rented an entire hotel suite out with 3 separate rooms, not just a suite, like a ballroom with 3 separate rooms. And the first room was, we were pitching the culture, we were pitching the company, we were pitching the opportunities. In the next room, we were giving skills assessment. And back then, this was about 18 years ago, the Wonderlic assessment, which is, I believe, no longer validated to use in the new age of inclusivity and diversity. But back then we were testing for intelligence, and we needed an intelligence. We tested a bunch of their folks, and we knew on a scale of 1 to whatever it is, 50, we needed a 25, which in any other assessment would be considered middle of the bell curve, better than average intelligence. We needed somebody who could pick up things quickly. So after we got them excited, we gave them 2 assessments: the DISC, which is how they play in the sandbox with other people, what's their personality, and the Wonderlic assessment. And then I think a basic typing test. Out of that assessment process, we lost 50% of the candidates. And by the way, we had 100 show up. So now we're with 50. Then we went through work history and career aspirations interview, which is really all about why they made the decisions in their career they did, what they learned in college, and how they've made business better places since they contributed, what they've accomplished, what they like and dislike. And then we move to the career discovery. What do you really want? What are your aspirations? What would right look like? From there, we screened out about 20 people. So now we're down to 30. And then we went in and did a behavioral interview, which is really a values-based behavioral interview. And we wound up with our 20 people. Now, what we did before we ever started, after we did the brand splash, we needed to understand these jobs. Turned up that it was 3 jobs in one. There were 3 separate roles, and the company was operating as if it was one role. No wonder they had such a high turnover. They were hiring people who could not do it all for a job that required them to do it all. So we lowered it to 3 very specific positions. And this is an organizational development process called the role analysis. And we created CPRs, comprehensive position requirements. So we had the brand identity, the employee value proposition, the very specific roles. There were 3, what the person needed to produce in those roles, the key performance indicators, and the behaviors. And then we created a specialized behavioral interviewing questionnaire. And all of the results from all of the candidates were compared to the benchmark that we built before we started, which is what makes it a viable and codified and fair hiring practice. Every candidate went through the exact same process, and they were all compared back to the original benchmark. It's critical that if you're going to do a hiring process, that you are in alignment with the rules of the US government labor relations and also the state that you're in. And 2 things that are pretty standard is you need to benchmark the role. It needs to be a bona fide occupational requirement for whatever you're asking for, and you need to have that verified and vetted. And we did it. We actually produced the results, placed those people. We had an 85% retention rate. And out of those people, we had a significant amount of folks that were promoted in a year's time. And there's still people that are still there. And that was 15 years ago. And the woman who gave me so much faith, Donna, and I are still friends. We still get together every year. She's been retired for almost 8 years, but she said this was a career game changer for her, that she gave me the opportunity. She trusted me. My company delivered. And that year we placed 200 people at her company using this process. And from then on, we've then made it a hiring process that we trained other people. And we're in the process of actually developing a software that helps companies do it. So let's talk about hiring. 2/3 of all hiring is estimated to be mistakes because they're made with inadequate information. These decisions are made by gut instinct or made by a resume or made because somebody knows this person. And then the person gets in the job and they're like, this isn't doing it for me. Or the manager says this person is not getting their work done. So if we want to raise engagement, we need to raise the quality of hiring. So let's look at some of the facts of the matter. We are in a workforce where we're changing the demographics and the psychographics of the people. We have 50 million fewer workers between the ages of 38 and 50, which are the prime age for people to get into leadership. So we have a major deficit of even the volume of people to promote, but also with the amount of experience, because your largest workforce right now is tied between baby boomers who are leaving and millennials who are coming or have been in for a few years. We also are facing the perfect talent storm because of those demographics, because of the psychology of different people in different generations that were raised with a different level of technology and different things going on in the world. people come from and have an outlook that's different from their predecessor generation. We also have engagement that 68% of the workforce is disenchanted, disengaged with their work or with their company. We also have a shortage of people to lead and a dearth of leadership because most organizations do not invest in professional development. Keen Alignment's clients do, that's why they're our customers. But across the board, people are either sending one person to some kind of training or one department, or they're putting everybody in the same training. They're not customizing leadership development to what they need as a company and what people need that are entering into this time of their life where they're going to be doing leadership. We also are currently facing a thriving economy, which means more jobs. And we also are dealing with this Me Too movement, which has basically drastically changed the way people allow themselves to be treated in the workforce. In California, I was just in a leadership, it's called Women Who Lead, so that's a plug for them, but it's about getting women ready to serve on professional for-profit boards. And there is the head of PERS, I forget her name right now, but the head of California PERS wrote a bill and got the bill passed that any public company or any government company has to have X percentage of women in leadership. The only reason that got passed is because of that Me Too. And now you're seeing more and more companies talking about who are the women on the board? Are there any women on the board? WeWork got a lot of bad press because there was no women in their executive team, but now they've added one. And you're seeing more and more companies all over the world adding more women to leadership. But it's not just that women have to be in leadership, it's also men and protected class and LBGT community saying, no, you can't treat me that way at work anymore. I deserve fairness and inclusion and equanimity. And so you have all sorts of things happening that are disrupting the status quo of how we hire and onboard people. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the advent or the exploitation or the advancement of artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. 30% of all the jobs we see existing today will cease to exist in a decade. And those are the jobs that don't necessarily require people skills. Those are the jobs that don't require innovative thinking or creativity. Those are the jobs that can be replaced by automation. And they are happening, and they're happening very, very fast. And we need to prepare our own organizations for these kind of changes. And we need to begin to implement vetting people's and candidates' human relation skills, resiliency skills, ability to recover, which is what resiliency is, ability to pivot and be agile, all as part of the hiring process because the world is changing right under our toes. So the top 10 reasons people leave begin with career development and end with work environment. And 80% of these reasons has everything to do with culture, management behavior, work-life balance, even comp and benefits, job characteristics, work environment. In some cases, even retirement, because if people were really bought in, they would stay and lease their knowledge back to the company as a contractor. So we have to start to look at, of these reasons people are leaving, did we know these things in the hiring process? Part of Keen Alignment's conscious hiring process is we have an interview questionnaire that digs deep into what's important to people. What are your drivers of engagement? How important is learning and development to you? How important is personal time and free time away from work? How important is the relationship with your boss? And stress management. These are all things that people are looking at. And culture. So let's look at the psychographics. I talked about it a little bit. What's important to know here is that there are 5 generations that are impacting how we work. Some people say, well, Maji, the World War II is no longer around. But even the person I talked to this morning, the World War II person who started that company is still around and is still influential and put processes and systems in place 40 years ago that are either working or not working right now. They still have an influence. They serve on many boards. And then you've got Zach, who's just entering. He's entering, kind of looking at, you guys are all nuts. This is the way you should do it. And each of these generations has their own way of operating, their own way of viewing the world. And it's not just millennials who want purpose and meaning in their work. It's every soul. 90% of all people want purpose and meaning. 90% of all people want a future. They want to know that their work and their life can be integrated. They want to know you care about safety, emotional safety, group safety, and physical safety of people. And people want to be excited about what your company's up to. So the psychographics of employment play every bit of a role in hiring as they do with engagement. So when you look at yourself and how you're going to contribute to a better hiring process, it's important that you look at your leadership, how you drive engagement, and how you do your role. And I want you to talk, Elizabeth, a little bit about how you shifted in these three categories as a result of really owning conscious hiring and culture in your organization.
Yeah, okay, so in my leadership with the conscious hiring process, I've realized that I am the first impression. You know, I am a department of one, so it's always me that a candidate is going to get an email from or speak to first. And in that first impression is my opportunity to just start enrolling them in understanding who we are from that very first interaction. I love it when at the end of a conversation, if I ask if someone has any questions, they're able to say, no, you kind of addressed them all throughout this process. Good. I'm good right now. And then in terms of workforce engagement, we are taking what we've learned from conscious hiring and how we've been matching candidates with the right work, and are applying that to every other aspect about how we work. We've been implementing our values and our behaviors throughout the employee life cycle, into employee evaluations and deeper into our in-person interview questions. And it's just really trying to make that the root of how we approach everything we do here. And then in role execution, throughout this whole process, I've really realized that I'm the driver. Again, as a department of one, it's up to me to make sure we're getting what we want out of this. And so I get to lead the process, and I've kind of achieved what I understand now, my purpose in HR, or my purpose in recruiting especially. But it's really about engaging and supporting staff from that very first conversation and interaction when they were a candidate to the day that they do leave us, whether they're leaving for another opportunity we couldn't afford them, or because they're retiring, because people stay where we are. So it's really about understanding how I get to lead that process as a whole and see the lasting impacts.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So critical components to hiring the right people. When PricewaterhouseCoopers did a survey of 300,000 CEOs, those CEOs said these 9 categories are the top areas of importance in hiring the right people. And you want to make sure that whatever hiring process you create, specifically, I can say that the conscious hiring process addresses all of this. It has several ways to discern how a person produces results, and if they are results oriented. Do they have the right behaviors to not only produce results, but honor our mission, vision, and values? Do people have the right personality to get along with each other? Work is hard enough, and there's enough mishaps and changes and challenges. We want people to feel good about working together and that they have the ability to get along together. And culture, do they fit the core values? Do they honor those core values? Are they trainable? Are they open-minded? Are they willing to admit when they make a mistake and willing to do the work to get better? Are they a long-term fit, which for most companies these days, if they're there 4 years, that's long-term. But we're finding even millennials that are staying longer because their needs are being met. And agile, do they have the ability to take a licking and keep on ticking? Are they resilient? Well, how do they respond in the face of upset, change, disappointment, stress, and even with a job change or responsibility change? And then the skills, look at where the skills rank. It's number 8 of 9. And then commitment, are they really committed to what that company's doing? So we need to have all these components built into our hiring process. So let's talk about what conscious hiring is in a linear model. And the linear model is It begins with benchmarking. What does the role need? If the role could talk, what would the role say it needs? And when we assess 9 to 11 people doing the same role, what are their behavioral test scores? What are their leadership competencies? And what's proven to work in that job? So it's a two-part street. One, the role analysis with the comprehensive position requirement, and two, benchmarking people who are already succeeding in that job and looking for common competency denominators, common behavior denominators. Next, it's making sure we have a wide array of a pipeline of people who can apply. For years, it was done the opposite way. It was, let's only have a few people apply and we'll have to pick one of those few people. Well, if we really want the best people and we want diversity, we need to open that pipeline and bring as many people in as possible and let technology and our process take us from 100 to 50, and we can process 50. But if we know the people have to have a certain amount of intellect to do the job, have to have a certain amount of discernment, have to have a certain amount of organization, we can test for that. We can have a brief conversation, or like Elizabeth, send a really well-written email welcoming them to the company, sharing about your mission, vision, and values, and that you have a hiring process and I need you to take this assessment. So you're authenticating the pipeline by making sure the people are truly qualified. Then once you get your people who've taken that assessment, then you start your phone screening and you take your time with people and you ask them the top line questions that would help you determine if this person is right. Then there's the interview, the capability index, the match fit score, integration, socialization, and visualization. So Elizabeth, I want you to talk a little bit about the work history interview and how that's made a difference for you, and then the assessment that you're using, and then how you match people up and what you do for onboarding.
Okay, so the work history interview, I like to explain that to candidates as a deeper dive where I'll get to learn more about their career, the choices they've made, the things that have led them into the path of where they are today, looking at our job as an opportunity for themselves. Also some learning more about their education. My favorite part though of the work history interview is a little bit of an exercise at the end of it, and it always ends up kind of being a fun opportunity to learn more about the candidate, where they are asked to rank in order a series of phrases that really show me what they value and what's important to them, because the phrases are just impossibly hard to separate from each other. And the ones who laugh at that and are just like, I'm so stuck, you know, I just can feel for them, because they don't want to say, I need career satisfaction more than I need professional development. I want both of those things. And so it just facilitates, again, that really awesome connection between myself in understanding them and them and just being heard and knowing that we care about what they want and what they're looking for in their work environment. So that's honestly one of my favorite conversations to have with somebody through the process. In the assessments, we use two primarily. First, we use, I guess it's the big 5 assessment: job fit, profile, match. And that's kind of just a high level, little bit of insight into how somebody works. And I love that one because A, it's where people will opt out if they aren't interested in participating in that kind of a process. And so it's a quick screen out there. We use that early in the process. But it also just gives me, again, kind of a high level intro and some questions that I can dig into deeper with the candidates along the way if there's something that's intriguing or maybe not quite where I was hoping to see it, but something we can talk about. And again, I view all of these as a tool in the process. None of them are like pass fail. It's all a little bit of insight into understanding the candidate as a whole. And what was the last piece you wanted to talk about?
How you match, your matching process. Oh, no. It was the integration socialization.
Yeah. So with that, we've used the, again, we're doing a lot of work around our culture and our values. And so we want to make sure that the candidates are matched with who we are and how we work best. We want to support them in achieving their longer term career goals. And so knowing taking all of the information we gather through the process and summarizing it into just a really, not quite a score, I guess, maybe it calls it a score on the form, but there's a form called the gold standard, and really just filling that out and being able to feel confident that we've got the right person and we know what they're going to need to be successful and we can deliver that. That's a big piece. We want to make sure that we are able and have the capacity to meet what they're looking for to set up their onboarding. And then once they are here, we consider somebody in an onboarding mode for 6 months. Like, you don't need to be expected to be an expert in your role until at least then. And we do a lot of sit downs with upper management, sit downs with other departments, go sit in on other department meetings and learn how they work so you can understand the big picture of how we work. We give just a lot of space, and then we do some fun stuff too. Again, we work in land conservation, so we get to take our new hires out to the land we manage, you know, put on your hiking boots and go out for a day with other staff.
Good.
So all of it, fun and the basics of policy. It's all in there, but mixed.
Good. And I want to just talk about the match fit scores. So my recommendation is, if they are not an 80% match, if they don't have 80% of what you're looking for, probably it's going to be really hard for that person to deliver. And we don't want to set people up for failure. One of the hardest times in a person's life is when they're told you're fired. It really impacts their self-esteem. So I want to tell you a story about Jenny. With Jenny's permission, Jenny had, millennial actually, put into a job as a recruiter with one of our clients. They needed to hire 36 people in 2.5 months. There was $10 million worth of business at stake. They needed to hire the right people. The general manager, CEO, asked her to do it. And she was just completely overwhelmed. She was happy that he had faith in her, but she'd never done hiring before. So he hired me to coach her. He hired me to teach her conscious hiring. And she did it. And she actually finished the job. And 80% of those people are still there, and 4 of them have been promoted. And they deployed conscious hiring on every element of human being that would be applying for that foundry. They did testing in intelligence, testing in mechanical interest, integrity questions, work ethic questions. And what she learned is that it took a discipline to be present in the interviews. And I think, Elizabeth, you could probably say you had to learn that too. We all do. Like, yeah. Really stay in the moment. And she used this thing called the upfront contract to tell candidates that this is our process. Like Elizabeth said, she had to learn to tell people this is our process and this is why it's important. Jenny would ask candidates for feedback, and she would ask other managers for feedback on how her performance was and how well she was matching. And she had to learn to take that feedback with a grain of salt and to be open to that feedback rather than to defending herself. She believes that gut instinct is one of the best tools that she has, and she connects the gut instinct to the assessment results. So if the gut tells her to go forward, she always checks and says, was I right? And she's honing her gut instinct to look out for what the assessment is going to tell. So she's making her gut better because she's using data. She's validating data. And then she uses the assessment just like Elizabeth does before she talks to anybody, because they get so many hundreds of candidates that she needs to, and they have a really good employment brand, she needs to only be talking to the people who has what she wants. And then implementing phone screening versus just bringing candidates in, and then really spending time to get to know who the human is behind their candidate cape. So Jenny's turnaround results, she accomplished what she needed to do. She says, I had to get out of my own way and have more confidence. And she also had a coach, so that made a difference. She clarified expectations with all the managers that she was doing hiring for, so she could eliminate frustration. In the beginning, she just went with the job description, and then she had to go back and do a role analysis on every one of those jobs so that she was already in agreement. And she kept focused on the end result. And now her misery rate went down from 50% of all hiring being failed to 33. Now you have to understand they're in a foundry, it's 110 degrees. on a cold day in there. And Jenny is also in line to be the next HR manager because of the difference that she's made and the difference and the willingness that she is to jump in even when she doesn't believe in herself. So we've got a few more minutes. I want to talk about the steps of conscious hiring. First and foremost is to maximize your HR and talent management effectiveness to get that you, Elizabeth, Jenny, Lauren, all of the people that, Tiffany, Annie, Cody, the list goes on, that you are an internal consultant and that it's all about you raising your level of self-esteem, your level of confidence so you can make recommendations. So we're kind of running out of time. Do you have anything you want to say about that, Elizabeth, for you, what you needed to do to raise your, this is the whole conversation of passenger seat?
Yes. Yeah. So I used to view myself as the passenger in my own career and in just kind of the world. I was like, it's easy. I do many things. I can work anywhere. I can do anything. But through this process, utilizing conscious hiring, working with Maji and Keen Alignment on a number of projects, I've realized that I like this, I'm good at this, and I get to be the driver. And so having these tools gives me the roadmap so that I get to run it. And I'm just that much more satisfied now in the work I get to deliver.
Awesome. And then step 2, everything you do has to be legal and compliant. The 4/5 rule, OFCCP, validation, benchmarking, make sure you're using concrete process and concrete data if you're going to create a hiring process. Step 3, understand the organizational dynamics, understand your culture, what your core values are, and understand what's working and not working so that when you bring people in, it's a natural progression. Use tools. We use lots of tools to understand organizational effectiveness and culture. You can use the same assessments that Elizabeth uses to do that or different assessments. We have access to hundreds and we work with some of the most profound publishers in the industry. So understand the OD element, the organizational development part of organizational effective culture and analysis. Step 4 is actually deploying the conscious hiring model. Step 5 is understanding role analysis. So I want to go back to deploying the conscious hiring. Before you start hiring, your interviews need to be created, your values-based interviews. You need to have your phone screener. She's shaking her head. You need to have your gold standard. You need to have your checklist. You need to have done your role analysis. You need to have your whole process set so that once you turn the switch on, you can execute very, very quickly. We're also turning it into a workflow software. So in the future, you don't need all that paperwork. It automatically generates itself. But right now, it's not that hard once you have the templates to do that. Then it's the role analysis process. It's really peeling back the onion and asking if the job could talk, what would the role need? What does the role need to produce? And then job promotion and marketing. Remember, you need a wide funnel. You need as many people as possible applying. So you need to sell the opportunity. If you want to sell John Smith what John Smith buys, you need to sell John Smith through John Smith's eyes. Your brand needs to call in the right person. Then there's the interviewing, the step 7 of interviewing and assessment. This is literally bringing people in either for group interviews or the actual work history interview or the values-based behavioral interview, but it is a process. And I also want to say bring your candidate in more than one time. Maybe not 3 times, maybe not 4 times, but more than one time. And then there's the gold standard, the matching, the how you communicate to the hiring manager. So Elizabeth, I want to make an offer and then I'm going to have you wrap up. Anybody who's listening to this, I'd like to give you the opportunity for you to take one of the many assessments that Keen Alignment works with. This, we get results from the people that take it that say this is spot on. This will tell you a snapshot of where you are right now in terms of your belief system, your values, your behaviors, and how well you lead, what your competencies are, and what your gaps are. And so I invite you to take that for free. You can put 44222 in your text and then maximize 123 in the body. And then Elizabeth, I'd like to, while I have this Transform Your Culture from the Inside Out workshop up and available. If people are interested, you can contact us. But Elizabeth, in closing, what would you say has been the most fun for you in conscious hiring? And secondly, your biggest learning?
I think the thing that's the most fun is getting to know the people and seeing them come into work. I love being their ally the day that they show up, that I can have that connection with them and understand who they are. So I can see them sitting at their desk, but knowing they've always got someone to come to. I love being that person. So I love that connection. And then my biggest learning was, really just how having the framework of conscious hiring has really just shaped my understanding of my own role going through the process. It's given me a lot of confidence in this process. 4 years ago, I think I had hired maybe 6 people, and just now in the last 4 years, I've had my hand in 20 something people getting a job. And that just really stokes me that they're here, that I had a role in that. And it just boosts my confidence in my own work. And again, like we were saying, the driving the car, that I get to drive my own car in my career and in this work.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your time and your energy and your willingness to share. And thank you, everybody who's listening, and have a wonderful day and best of success.